Hi, everyone. I'm Maggie McGrath, editor of Forbes Women. Voters in 10 states across the country are voting on ballot measures that will determine whether or not to enshrine abortion access in their states' constitutions. Those results are still coming in as we speak, but joining us now to break down the situation as it stands at 9 p.m. on Tuesday night is Lupe Rodriguez. She's the executive director of the Latina Institute, which advocates for reproductive justice. Lupe, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
So as I just said, 10 states have abortion-related ballot measures. We have some voting, more than some. Almost 90% of the vote is in Florida on Amendment 4. It's currently looking like 47% is saying yes to enshrining abortion access in the Floridian Constitution, 43% no, and that state, of course, needs a supermajority in order to pass that amendment. What's your take on the early results in Florida and, in general, the other abortion ballot measures that folks are considering?
Well, I think we're on the Florida ballot amendment. We're waiting till all the votes are counted. We knew always going into this race that it was going to be incredibly close. Unfortunately, what we know with supermajority ballot initiatives, or the ones that require that in the vote count, is that it takes an extra push to be able to get the vote numbers out that we need for these kinds of changes to happen. And so, we always knew it was going to be close. And so we're just waiting for that every single vote to be counted in this race. I think we're thinking about this in the same way in other parts of the country. What we know underlying all of this in the work that we've done in terms of polling, and also in the work that we've done on the ground in states like Florida, that women, people in general, are supportive of abortion access. We know that that's true. We know specifically that Latinos and Latinx people across the country are also supportive of abortion access and abortion care, and have stated in polls and other conversations that they will come out to vote in support. So, we're still holding out hope, and we're hopeful that across the country, folks will be able to make their voices heard on this issue.
How have you spent your election day? And talk to me more about the conversations you're having within the communities that the Latina Institute serves and what they're telling you about their views on these abortion ballot measures.
Well, I've spent the last few weeks actually canvassing in Florida. Today on election day, I'm in Arizona, and have spent the day talking to voters here about the proposition on the ballot to protect abortion access here. And, what we're finding is that folks are supportive of abortion care in general. We think that there is, a disconnection between the initiatives and sort of how they affect people's lives in some cases. Folks don't think about this issue every day, and we already know that. Folks don't wake up every day thinking about abortion or whether they need one. It really comes as something that is necessary when they need it, and it comes to their consciousness. And so what we're doing a lot is, raising folks' awareness about what's happening, about the abortion bans in the different states, talking to folks about, who should have the right to access care, and who should have the right to make a decision about these issues. And in large majority, what we're finding is that folks are saying individuals should have the ability to make those choices and not politicians.
What's your sense of how Latinas and Latinos are turning out in general for this election? I know the exit polls are still coming in, but based on the conversations you've had on the ground in Florida and now in Arizona, how does enthusiasm seem compared to prior cycles?
We found that both in our polling and again in the work that we've done on the ground, knocking on doors, that folks are interested and energized to vote. We found that in some polling that we did recently, that women of color specifically are very motivated to vote and see voting as an important part of making change in their communities. We oversampled women in Florida, in Georgia, in Texas, and in Virginia, and found that of the people we spoke with, so women of color, Latine, Black, AAPI, and young women, that 72% of them in Florida said that they were motivated to vote, 79% in Georgia, 73% in Texas, and 81% of women in Virginia. So we think those numbers will show up in the exit polls. We think there's a lot of energy, and certainly specifically, there's a lot of energy around abortion access and protecting it at the ballot box.
Now, Florida requires a supermajority to pass Amendment 4. Of the other 9 ballot initiatives, which other states have supermajorities, or are the rest simple majority votes?
The other ones, I believe the majority are simple majority votes. I'm fairly certain that in Florida is the one that has a 60% threshold, and so we found that was going to be challenging to begin with. What we've also found, I think, in many of these states is that folks who are working to take away abortion rights have been very I don't know, have proliferated a lot of mis and disinformation, particularly targeted at Latina and Spanish-speaking communities. And so, we've been concerned about that. We've been working against that in various states, but certainly in a place where we need a supermajority, that kind of attack against the reality of what these amendments and initiatives stand for, I think will have an impact on the vote count.
Without repeating the mis or disinformation, because we don't want to spread misinformation, what is something you want audiences to know that is accurate about reproductive health care access in the states in which you are working?
Well, in many of the states that we're working in, many of the amendments or the ballot initiatives do not necessarily expand on rights that existed in those states before. In some cases, well, in some they do. In Nevada, for example, with Question 6, it does enshrine a constitutional protection. It does go as far as making it so that there is access in terms of healthcare coverage, and same in Colorado. But in most other places, it's really just a return to the laws that existed before Roe versus Wade was overturned in these states. And so one of the pieces of mis and disinformation has been that these initiatives or amendments go farther than what used to exist in many cases. In places like Florida, that's one of the things that we've been hearing, that the folks have been hearing. And so we're very concerned about those specific mis and disinformation, that specific mis and disinformation in some of these cases, which, folks are not necessarily ready for when they're going to the ballot box and are disconcerted by the sort of different messages that they're hearing.
So tonight, of course, is a night of waiting on results. What does your job look like tomorrow and the week after tomorrow and the week after that? And is there recourse in states that perhaps had a ballot measure and it doesn't pass tonight? Then what do you do?
Mm-hmm. Well, what we're going to do is continue to organize. What we know based on the polling that we've done, based on the conversations that we have with community members, is that the majority of people in this country, the majority of Latinos and Latinxes support abortion access. We know that there's still work to do in terms of fighting back against stigma and mis and disinformation. And so that has always been a core part of the work that we do at Latina Institute and that we do in coalition with a lot of other organizations. So we'll continue to do that work. We'll continue to come back to try to restore our rights. We're working on federal legislation. We're also working at state level houses to be able to do some of this work. We've always known that even if we won in this election, if we win at these ballot boxes, that the organizing will have to continue. Even when we had the protections of Roe versus Wade, many in our communities did not have full access, and so the plan has always been to keep working, keep organizing for exactly what our communities need. And so win or lose, we're going to continue to do that work, and we're going to work on the mis and disinformation. As I said, we're going to work to continue to change hearts and minds and to work with folks so that they understand what this means for their lives.
Now, of course, you are on the ground in many states talking to Latino communities, and shifting gears more broadly to election sentiment, I have to ask, given the rally at Madison Square Garden by former President Donald Trump and some of the attacks against Puerto Ricans, what have you been hearing in the aftermath of those remarks, which were so ugly?
Well, we've been hearing that folks are, feel attacked and feel that they have, they're being singled out. One of the things that we hear from people at the doors, especially the Spanish language voters that we're talking with, is that they don't want to feel like they're other in this country when they're Americans, they're voters, they're participating and paying into the systems that we have in this country. They're working really hard to help their families get ahead. And so I think there's a sentiment of wanting to respond at the ballot boxes. As I mentioned, there's a lot of folks who are motivated to vote in this election. And so I think that is resonated with folks in that I've spoken to at the doors, not wanting to be othered, not wanting to be cast aside as not part of this this community, this country that we're in, and motivated to vote because of what they've heard.
As you look at some of the exit polling and the way the Hispanic community is breaking for Harris versus Trump, do you see a reflection of those comments and the sentiments that you're hearing? Or do you think folks made up their minds well before the Madison Square Garden rally?
I think definitely some people had already. I think there are a lot of concerns, and frankly, one of the things that we've heard, for example, in Florida, at the doors in Hialeah, where we were doing some canvassing for Amendment 4, that folks are concerned about the economy. They're concerned about the cost of living, and on the one hand, and on the other hand, are concerned about being able to have the freedom to make decisions about their bodies and their lives, and having to make a choice, really, in many cases, between who they see as the person who can support them in their economic situation versus who they know will protect their rights. And one of the things that we're nonpartisan, we're not talking about candidates, but we do want to make sure that folks understand the systems that govern their lives, right, that determine what the cost of living, and make connections for them between having access to the right to be able to make choices about your body and your life, and how that connects to your economic opportunities, your ability to put food on the table for the kids you already have. 60% of people who have abortions already are parents, and so we know there's more work to do there to be able to make those connections with people, and it's certainly a part of what we'll be doing after this election.
Lupe, before we let you go, I have to ask, is there anything else that the Forbes audience should know about what you're seeing on the ground and what you are observing when it comes to these abortion ballot measures?
Again, I think what we're hearing is that folks are mobilized and really thinking about the importance of these votes. We're also, as I said, unfortunately hearing a lot of mis and disinformation that is targeting our communities, especially Latino and Latinx communities, that is dissuading them from some of these votes, sometimes dissuading them from voting altogether. And so, we are, those kinds of things are kind of falling in my mind right now as we're seeing the results come in. We know that this isn't over until every vote is counted. And so we're also, waiting until every vote is counted in order to make any kind of definitive statement about what has happened or what the situation is. But we know, again, that what we've heard going into this, that folks are motivated, that folks believe in access to abortion care, including Latinos and Latinxes. And we hope that shows up and is borne out and overcomes a lot of the barriers and mis and disinformation that folks have confronted in this election season.
It's not over until every vote is counted. That is such an important message. Lupe Rodriguez, thank you so much for joining us on a very busy night. We really appreciate your time and your insight.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much for having me.